I'm Dutch. I speak Dutch. Could never give a workshop in Dutch.
No way.
I
Okay.
also, being this smart person challenging the implementation part. Like, I think in that way, you're just trying to show how much you know about a system, how good you are.
Yeah, show off.
Yeah, show off. And you're not serving anybody. To me, it's really crucial that you are that bridge between the implementation partner and the customer.
Hey Abdel, how are you doing today?
Hi, MAHDI. Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and I'm doing amazing because I think this is the second episode where I have an in-person person coming to the studio for a podcast. So I'm very excited for it. For the one who don't know Abdel, he's coming all the way from Amsterdam. So I'm looking forward to this episode for multiple reasons. One is getting to know a little bit more about the European Workday market, how Workday consultants, live there, and all of the opportunities in there. And then, obviously, we want to know more about what you're building and your career path as well. Starting with the fact that I saw on your LinkedIn profile that you were a management consultant before you became a Workday consultant. Can you tell us a little bit more about that transition?
Correct. Well, first of all, thanks for the invitation, and happy to be here and finally meet in person. So really good to be here. So initially I have a background in organization science and strategic HR.
Okay.
And I started working as a consultant in strategic HR, advising on HR topics. Did that for multiple years. But then at some point, I felt like, hey, I just deliver or create reports where nothing ever happened with. Let's say they end up in a drawer, to put it like how they say it in Dutch. And I want to do something more tangible, like something like, hey, you really delivered something instead of just a report and an advice, which even though the advice can be good, I did want to do something more or deliver something more tangible. And that's why I moved into consultancy in 2016. And moved into the world of Workday, which was at that moment completely new to me.
Yeah.
I had some conversation back then with somebody from Accenture because I knew I want to move into consultancy in IT specific, or the combination between HR and IT. And I knew somebody within Accenture, had some conversation, somebody who was not in Workday, but more like
general?
In general, introducing me to Accenture, like how it would be to work there. And I had some chats, and I was like, hey, this is a place I would like to work. It was really a good feeling. And then suddenly a vacancy came online for a Workday consultant. Was in 2015, actually, the vacancy, 10 years ago. And I applied, and
you got the job.
And I got the job indeed. And I moved in start of 2016 into Workday officially.
And then did you choose Workday because of Workday, or was it just a good opportunity to combine your HR background with
No, it was a good
tech?
comment. Honestly, I didn't know anything about HR systems, actually. So it was the thing which coincidence indeed.
Yeah.
And it was like the connection because I had chats with Accenture.
Yeah.
So I've had a good feeling with Accenture. Had some random coffees there with some consultants there and some managers. And that felt good. And that was actually the link, and it became Workday, and the rest is history, I want to say. But so it was initially a coincidence, but looking backwards, it was a great choice indeed, because Workday was the next big thing in Netherlands and in Europe in general, but in Netherlands for sure at that moment.
And I'm curious because a lot of people listening to the podcast are also interested in becoming Workday consultants sometimes. And so is speaking to people like coffee chats before getting the job at Accenture, was it like part of a strategy, or was it just luck? You had a friend who introduced you to Accenture?
No, it was part of strategy to go to to move to a consulting firm. So I was doing, let's say, in-house HR advice. I did this talent development program. So I was like, no, I really want to move into a real consulting firm. Yeah. But I knew like I want to do something with IT. And it was a coincidence that I knew somebody at Accenture, indeed.
Okay.
Could have been one of the other big four as well, probably. But it was a coincidence at Accenture, and also Workday was a coincidence. It would be great if I could say, like, hey, no, I
did my research.
I did my research, but before I had my interview as well, I had to really check online what is Workday, and there was not a lot you could find back then. It was 2015. There was like some things on YouTube, some videos, but still very vague. There was not a lot of information to be found. So as I said, Workday was pretty new in the Netherlands as well. There were not many customers in 2015, so it was pretty new indeed. So that's why afterwards a good guess, I would say. And,
I had a similar experience even when I applied. I went into like PwC right after university, and I kind of chose Workday because I heard about Workday a little bit, but I didn't know what was Workday. So I had to do research before the interview as well to get to know more about the system. So I agree with you on that. And then I'm curious, for the ones who started their career in America, so Canada and in the US back in those, 2016, 2017, we did our training in Chicago for the HCM part. And then for the other modules, it was all over the place. Yeah. How was it like in Europe?
No, for us as at Accenture back then, they had and not every consulting firm did have that. Normally you had to do your training at Workday. But Accenture had their own, had the ability to give the training themselves as well, that you could follow the training and the exam within Accenture. So we had our exam in London, in a Marriott hotel near Heathrow, and it's something you never forget. Actually, it's that now we have a lot of online classes as well.
Right now, everything is online.
Everything online,
unfortunately.
Yeah. Back then it was like you never forget the first, because now you see like the career path everybody had who stayed in Workday. You see some are moved to like senior management positions, some moved outside of consultancy, but you still have a connection with those people who you did the training with, because it was, I believe, 7 days. It felt like a boot camp. It was all day sessions, so much information, having that whole thick book of work there with all the information.
The admin guide.
And then you end up with an exam where you need to create an organization and hire somebody. So those are things you actually never forget. So you still have a very good relationship with those people you did the training with. So to give answer to your question, it was in London back then, and it was a great memory.
And then you said that Accenture was handling it, but you were still getting the official Workday certification.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just that Workday, I think Accenture was big enough, and they had like their own official, could give the examination, and very official everything. So it was not like, hey, let's help Accenture consult as Accenture, because you really had to pass the exam, because we also had colleagues who I think you should fail the exam even. So it was really like So it's
we did have a few colleagues like that as well. I think if you didn't focus on it enough, you would fail.
You could fail. Absolutely. It was like it wasn't that easy actually, the first exam and the first time. So
I guess right now online is a bit easier.
I'm not sure, but you could also. I remember you really had to pay attention and really like all the information and make notes and chat with the person next to you, like, hey, do you get this thing, and discuss it. And now online you can easily get distracted as well. I'm not sure. I was lucky enough to have all my certifications, also the one afterwards, like recruiting, talent and performance. Everything was in class actually.
So all of your certifications
all my certifications were in class. I did advanced reporting, was also that was the only one I did online, by the way, the advanced reporting. But all the rest was in class, where I think you learn most from, because you talk to people, like have use cases. And,
you meet other people.
Yeah, you meet other people.
But then since you were with Accenture, did you meet other people outside of Accenture or just Accenture colleagues?
No, at that moment only Accenture. Afterwards, the additional certifications. So the core HCM was with Accenture, but the other one, like recruitment, was like with other people in class.
So
and it was maybe fun.
Where was it? In
Amsterdam, in the
cool.
Workday office. And fun, I'm not sure since when Workday changed that, but call it in the old days, we used to have like the recruiting certification. We actually sat also with customers.
Oh, so we had the same. That was a Europe thing, I think.
Yeah, maybe that was a Europe thing.
We didn't have that in North America.
It's also not anymore now. But we used to have. You sit like in training for recruiting training, and you have customers sitting there, and then the only thing they didn't have to do is the exam on the Friday, for instance, but they could leave after 4 days. But I remember like some people who were like sitting there doing the certification, and then the week after they used to have like a workshop to give to a customer who was also in that same training. Okay. So it was a bit awkward to sit actually to just being certified and actually go to the customer exactly, where you have to act like you know everything about the system. No, so that was in the time still where you were sitting sometimes with customers. So a lot of things have changed since then, but
well, COVID changed everything.
Especially COVID. Yeah, indeed, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. And so how many years did you stay with Accenture then?
I've worked for 2 years exactly at Accenture. Did a few projects, different type of projects, data migration lead, recruitment, implementation, talent and performance. So luckily, I was lucky enough, because if you worked for the big implementation partners, especially in that time, there were not that many implementations, like new implementations. So sometimes you also had to be lucky to be first in line to get that
to get the project,
and to become the lead to get experience, because you were certified, but you still have to build that experience. And I was lucky enough that I was able to get roles like where I could learn a lot and grow a lot. I said like a data migration role was very important to learn exactly how is Workday built up, how do you need to fill in data templates, how does a data migration work. But you also learn a lot about the processes themselves, of course, if you load data, for instance, for recruitment module.
Yeah.
So I've learned a lot of things in those first projects where I benefit from later on very much. Yeah.
I was going to ask you, do you feel like those 2 years were enough for you to maybe go on your own? Or
no, absolutely not. No,
not yet.
No. What I noticed after 2 years of Accenture, and I decided at some point, like, hey, I want to leave Accenture, and actually not because Accenture, it was a great company to work for, a great team, still in close contact with a lot of consultants from back in the days. But the reason why I left was intentionally. I moved to Kainos.
Okay.
It was a long search for like, hey, where do I want to make my next move to? Because at that time, Accenture acquired a company called Day9.
Oh, yeah.
And they were. It was like a boutique firm. And their consultants were doing like smaller projects and multiple projects at the same time. So they like smaller project, but a lot of repetition, a lot of time. Like, hey, at the same time, you're doing a design session on Monday, Wednesday, another one. And so this way you could learn a lot and see a lot from Workday.
Yeah.
Where if you do a major program where you become, let's say, a talent and performance lead, you would see for 1 year long, you see only the talent and performance solution of that specific customer.
Yeah.
Which can also be challenging in its way. So there's no good and bad, but after 2 years of Accenture doing like big programs where you see one module for a longer period, for instance, and one specific solution at the same customer, I wanted to do that deep dive into the system and see more of the system, more customers, because every customer, no matter how big or small a customer is, every customer has their own requirements.
Yeah.
So for me, my learning path, I want to really dive into Workday and see more different solutions to become more this, let's say, broadly oriented and also broadly experienced to be able to advise my next customer even better. So that's why I made a move. And I chose for Kainos because Kainos had more of these projects, like a bit smaller projects, like a Phase X implementation, which typically go a bit quicker. And also they had a nice setup back then where you had like, you're the lead, you do a bit of configuration, but you also have like sometimes a junior with you who could like learn from the workshops, but then also help with configuration sometimes. So this way you'll be able to handle more customers at the same time. And that was the reason after 2 years of Accenture, to make my next move actually.
Yeah, I like to ask this question because I think every consultant has a different answer. In my case, I was at PwC and even I stayed for 2 years as well. And in those 2 years, I think I had maybe 2 projects. Not enough just because, I wasn't on the bench for most of my time there. So I didn't have that experience really required, I would say, in 2 years. That's why I had to make my next move and then have like a few more repetition. I think it's all about repetition.
It's a repetition, absolutely.
One customer after the other, you learn. Even if everyone is different, you get the big picture. And that prepares you for what's next, either management role or going independent.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. I think indeed that the repetition helps you also to be more self-confident, have some confidence. Because giving workshops is not that easy. You stand in front of a client, they expect you to know everything about the system. You need to tell them like your advice, like, hey, this is what we want to achieve with a recruiting module, or this is what we want to achieve as recruiting team or as a company, and you need to tell them how you need to design the system to achieve that. And that's quite a responsibility. So it's also it can be very challenging as well. And I think the more repetition you had and the more times you have seen certain requirements, the more often you've thought about solutions, the more often you've been challenged by a customer to get into the system and test again, go test another solution, go to community.
Yeah.
Because community is so big, and I hear sometimes complaints about how difficult the search the search engine works in Workday community, which I can fully relate to. But if you don't have a use case from a customer, it's very difficult to go in community because you can search on everything.
Yeah.
And this way, if you're being challenged constantly by a new customer to find a certain solution, and you have a very quick, like at the same time, maybe another small project, you can take that experience right away the same week or a week after to that other customer. And that means that you grow also your confidence level, your experience, your knowledge. And I think, long story short, the repetition is really key.
Especially within industries. I remember having 2 hospitals at the same time, 2 implementations. And whatever I learned with one hospital, like I could instantly implement.
I often hear consultants say, like, hey, this is what another customer did, so let's do it the same way, or this is what I would recommend. I think the key question is still, and I'm not going to lecture people now on how to be a consultant. It's not the purpose of this session, but the most important, what do you want to achieve as a customer? What is your goal? And I think just standing there as a workshop and telling them, and sometimes it's also not what customers want to hear, by the way. Sometimes customers want to hear that we tell them what the best way of working is. But if you then tell the customer what the best way of working is without asking what do you want to achieve, then you're just copy-pasting what you learned at a previous customer. And I think, you should always match those 2 things. Of course, take your experience from previous customer, maybe even some less pitfalls, for instance, like, hey, this is, if a customer wants to go direction A, it's fine, it works technically, but we've seen it other customers, like, hey, you can run into certain other issues, or operationally doesn't work that well if you go for this solution. So, and at the end, it's up to the customer to make a call, of course, like which solution they would prefer.
I have a question for you. How do you prepare workshops today versus 10 years ago?
What I used to, and I did that very quickly when I moved to Kainos, because I used to do a lot of workshops at some point. I had like every 2 or 3 weeks a different project starting. I did a lot of recruiting implementation, for instance, talent platforms as well. And every 3 weeks I had to give another workshop. And if you just do the big projects, you basically do one design session in, let's say, January.
Yeah.
And you don't need to do any design sessions until the next year, until you roll off from that project. So it could be that more than a year you don't have done a design session for, let's say, recruitment. And the year after, okay, you come new customer, you just build your slides again or use the old slides and tweak them. But because I had so many repetitions, I had to become smarter in creating my deck. So I had very one specific personalized deck almost, like this is the story I want to tell during the workshops.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have to constantly waste a lot of time to prepare for workshops. I knew exactly the story I was going to tell, ask the right questions to the customer, and this is what we're going to deliver during the workshop. So we knew exactly also in terms of timing, because we do know exactly, okay, from Monday till Wednesday, I need this time to get to 90% of the design. We have the Thursday, for instance, still for some additional things or for some minor things we didn't make, like the parking lot items. And I knew then Friday we could close in time the workshop. So it was like, because we had upfront, we knew like, hey, we have only 3 days for workshop or 2 days or 4 days.
Yeah.
This way I really knew exactly like how my deck looks like. So I personalized my deck completely. That helped me actually to be more prepared and better prepared for the...
I'm curious about something. So you just mentioned something, and then I had all of these memories. You said that these workshops would take 2 or 3 days, and I remember that, yes, it did. Even when I used to do like absence and time, it would take maybe like 1 day for absence and 1 day for time, and then 1 extra day for the parking lot items. You said? It's a good one.
Is it a European term?
Maybe. But right now, all of the implementations I did like last year. Yeah. It's like 4 hours absence, maybe 2 hours and a half time tracking. I don't know if it's maybe like smaller projects.
Smaller projects, yeah.
But I remember one particular project. It was a big project. Like it took 8-9 months, but it's still 4 hours absence, 2.5 hours time tracking. It's not a lot, yeah.
No, that's not something I would immediately recognize. I say, of course, unless the scope is so small that like, hey, and the customer knows exactly what they want. And it can. I mean, I'm not an absence specialist, so I never gave myself the workshops for absence. But if I talk about like say my modules, which I did
Yeah.
the most, like recruitment, HCM, talent and performance, it was minimal like 3 days.
3 days,
because
okay.
otherwise I can't go in one day through the whole recruiting module, because you simply have pretty big processes. You have like the job requisition process, you have the job postings, you have the career site.
I see.
You have then the application form for candidates. You go through the application process, and then you end up with offers and employment agreements, etc. So it's pretty lengthy, a lot of decisions to take. So even though you want to go quick, I think you need at least 2 days, but then you didn't cover everything. Then it's like, okay, we accept that we took like 75%. We can start building that as like a mock version maybe, but then in parallel, while we're maybe building that first version, we need to take some other decisions as well, because recruiting is simply a quite big module with a lot of decisions to take.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on the scope, I don't think that the amount of time needed for workshops has decreased, at least to my
in your experience. Okay.
In my experience,
got it.
yeah,
Okay. So maybe it's just me.
Or you're very efficient.
Maybe. Okay, cool. And then you achieved and you got the experience that you wanted from Kainos. How many years did you stay at Kainos?
Only 1 year.
Only 1 year? Okay.
Yeah, 1 year. The team, I'm not sure if I should tell all the things about maybe it's confidential, but a lot of people were leaving at that moment.
Yeah.
And my manager left, my 2 managers left, and I felt like, hey, the team was really decreasing in the Netherlands. We had a small team in the Netherlands. Still, also was a nice company to work for, honestly. We had a fun team. Everything was okay from that perspective. But because I saw people leaving, I was like, hey, I'm not going to stay here as the last man standing in that Dutch team, let's say. So that was the moment I decided as well to make a move and to leave. But I was always very conscious in terms of decision making, like, hey, the next step should be logic. Because also when I made the first step from leaving Accenture, for me, it was a very conscious decision to not just go for, because at that time, the market was really good for consultants. You could go basically to every
other big four.
Yeah, you could go to every other one. But I intentionally didn't pick one of the big fours because it would have been the same as
style,
Accenture, style, let's say.
Yeah.
So also when I decided to leave Kainos, it was like a conscious decision. I decided to go on myself at that moment.
Okay, so you went independent.
Yeah, I went independent after Kainos.
So in total, 3 years of Workday Consulting, and then you went on
as an employer.
As an employee.
As an employee, 3 years in total. But I said that I never, also when I sometimes look at CVs of consultants, maybe that's a bit of a sidestep.
Yeah.
I'd almost look like, how many years are you in Workday?
Yeah.
For me, it's important. What did you do in those 3 years, 2 years, 5 years? You can tell me you're 10 years in Workday, but if you just did very specific roles or only one type of role, or you only, then it's, then you don't have the full experience, in my opinion. So it's the I think what you did in that time, I think is really crucial. It sounds like a cliche maybe, but I said that 1 year of Kainos feels still like I did like multiple years, because I did so many projects. And a lot in Germany, Switzerland. We did so many projects. I felt really like my development went really up in terms of system, let's say. So that's where I moved. Like some people like, hey, after 3 years already you moved into contracting. To me, I felt like, okay, it's because the team was leaving. So I didn't necessarily want to go contracting like after a year. It was more like that the team was decreasing, was becoming smaller, and I felt like I need to make a move, and I didn't feel like going to another implementation partner at that moment, because that would have been the same again. So I want to do something different, but the same work, but something in a different form. And that's why I decided to leave Kainos and go contracting.
I think I love the fact that you just explained that those 3 years felt like maybe 5 or 6, 7. Because unfortunately, even today, I think it's not the majority of people that I talked with that agree with this statement, where they would ask for a Workday consultant, and then when they saw that they have 2 or 3 years of experience, they're like, no, we want 10 years. We want 15 years. But yes, if you had 10 years of experience doing the same thing, the same module, the same role, then it's not as valuable. And the proof is our 2 experiences. If we compare your 2 years at Accenture and my 2 years at PwC, I think you had, in terms of years, maybe 2 more years. Like your 2 years were like 4 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, it depends on how many projects did you go live with, how many projects did you deliver, what modules did you work with, etc. So I love that we keep repeating that
Yeah,
in these podcasts. Maybe it will change the minds of a few people.
Yeah.
So I like that. Cool. Yeah, I think you're one of the most, like the earliest people who went independent after only 3 years. I had a good friend of mine who went after 2 years, but then all of the rest of the people are much like me, like 4 or 5 years along the way. I think I can relate also to your reasons. Even I left DXC for the same reasons, like people were leaving, etc. And I didn't necessarily wanted to go independent. It's just that I didn't want to go to an implementation partner. So it's always a good alternative. Tell me, in Europe, how's the like independent market? Do you know a lot of people who went independent?
Back then I was difficult to say one of the first. It sounds a bit, but I know I didn't know a lot of people in Netherlands at least. I know that the UK market, I believe, UK market is maybe still the biggest. I'm not sure the numbers exactly, but back then UK was after US, UK was one of the biggest markets in Europe at least, or the biggest. So Netherlands, we had quite a growth in terms of customers as of 2015, also in terms of consultants, of course. But when I started contract, I think in Netherlands, there were not a lot of people who were going contracting. Most were still with implementation partners or still with the end users, as we call them.
So I'm curious then, how did you get the idea of going contracting if you didn't know anyone else who went independent before?
The first thing was for me, like I felt, okay, I want to make that move. I said the team was decreasing in the Netherlands and I was like, okay, I'm not going to stay here on my own. So I made a choice to leave. That was the first choice. And then when I was looking at the different implementation partners, I wanted to still have the ability to select my own projects actually, because that was something like with the big implementation partners, you sometimes had like, hey, you need to wait for that big project to come. Everybody, I think every person without, it's not even bashing like the implementation part, the big ones, but you sometimes have to wait for those big projects to come, and then you need to hope to get a specific role. And I felt at that moment like, no, I want to be in control of what kind of projects I'm going to do. I did still like the implementation side of things, so I didn't necessarily want to go to the end user side. I still
customer side,
the customer side. I still liked the implementation side, but I simply didn't. I was not sure which implementation partner also to select. I think that was also an important reason. I was like, hey, I already worked at Accenture, Kainos. I was not sure, like, hey, I didn't want to make a move to one of the partners and then after a few months, like, hey, this isn't and then again have to leave within a year. That didn't feel right to me. So that's why I want to have the flexibility actually. And
I see. And contracting gives you that flexibility.
Contracting gives the flexibility. It was still like a bit of a, let's call it a scary move. But at the same time, it didn't feel very risky because the market was still pretty good. I think I said I left in a good way also with Kainos. I knew Kainos told me like as well, even like, hey, you can always come back to us. So that was all. I always find that most important. Like if you leave somewhere, leave your place like in a good way. Let's say in a good way. So I was like, hey, it's maybe a little bit of a risk. It's new. Not a lot of people are doing it. And I got an opportunity at another implementation partner to be hired as a contractor.
Okay.
And that was for me like, hey, this is
good middle ground.
A good middle ground because I still like the implementation side. So that was a ability to still stay in the implementation side of the of Workday. And at the same time, I had the flexibility to also explore like, hey, how is this partner? Do I still want to, is this a nice environment to work at? So it was the best of both worlds actually, being flexible as a contractor, but working at an implementation partner on different projects.
You got that flexibility and you got what you wanted. So what made you want more or think or be more ambitious before you founded AimUp? That you can also tell us more about?
So also that was like, it just actually happened just, how do you say it, organically?
Organically. It seems like your whole career is organic.
I mean, I think always things happen and you need to make a decision. That's the whole point of things, right? So things happen sometimes and then you need to act on it. Like then you take action. Am I going to make a decision to leave? Am I going to stay? Am I going to start a company or whatever?
Yeah.
So I think it's all about taking decisions and the reason, so I worked a few years as on the contracting side, on the implementation side, just over a year actually. And then I felt like, hey, there was this thing that every implementation started to become a little bit the same, in the sense that, and that was the first time this let's call it seed was a little bit planned, but I didn't know yet exactly what to do with it. So I was always like implementing, and I always felt like a lot of customers were at the same time also struggling sometimes to...
After go live, you mean?
No, like during the implementation.
During the
So we
implementation.
try as a consultant to explain as much as possible, as best as possible, how the system works, trying to make decisions. But I think still a lot of, and I'm not sure where that piece go wrong, maybe in the sales cycle, maybe when the system is being sold, maybe when an implementation partner is being contracted. But I always felt like, hey, customers are not always fully prepared on what's coming. And that's not to blame anybody.
Yeah.
But it was like reality. It was often like, hey, we come here, we prepare for the workshops, we try to make decisions, and you get delays in workbook being filled, customers struggling filling workbooks. They didn't always have the full availability because, of course, a business is still continuing. I mean, it's not that the world is stopping because you're implementing a system, right?
Yeah.
Recruiters still need to recruit. They can't be fully busy with filling workbooks or making decisions. And that's where I always felt like, hey, there needs to be some way to help also on the customer side to ensure that the implementation goes more smooth. Because what happens when you have these things, the consultants, I'm pretty positive every consultant do their utmost to make sure that the customer is being supported to the fullest. But also as a consultant, sometimes you only have a limited availability of hours. You also have deadlines to make. And what happens then at the end is that either decisions are being made too quickly, testing doesn't go fully as expected, for instance.
They don't test all of the
scenarios.
They
don't test everything. So a lot of things can happen during the implementation. And at the end, it's a long cycle, right? It's sometimes a year or longer. And then it's constantly like a bit of delay, a bit of wrong decisions, and then sometimes just before go live, you figure out certain things were not as expected. Whatever consultant, everybody has experienced it once, but also customers. So it's not even to blame somebody or whatever. It's more like being realistic that these things can happen if there is not enough, let's say, maybe Workday knowledge, like system knowledge on the customer side, but also not enough availability, not enough time to do things or to make certain calls. Sometimes it also things goes wrong in terms of translating between the consultant and the customer. Sometimes translations goes wrong from the customer to the consultant.
True, yeah.
And that's what I've experienced at some point, that I was like, hey, I need to do something with this. This is something which should be tackled in a way that customers are better prepared during the implementation as well, before they make the decisions, that you make the right decisions, because then you don't need to go back again to the drawing table while you already actually should be preparing for a go live, or while you should be testing your payroll integrations. You should not be making any basic how do you call it, significant changes to your system. And that was actually when the seed was planted. Let's say we need to do something. I need to do something with this support on the customer side. And that's how I actually was like having the idea. I need to start a company, let's say, or more not even start a company. That was even the first thing. It was really like focusing on the customer side more.
Yeah,
like bringing that knowledge
problem that you can solve.
And so bringing the Workday knowledge I've gained, bringing that to the customer side while the implementation is happening.
Does that mean that today you focus more on the customers more than the implementations?
Yeah. So at this moment, I'm focusing more indeed on the customer side. And that's where also my sweet spot is as well. I still like the implementation side. So I still love to do like a design workshop for a certain module. It's still like something you like, but now I've experienced both worlds, like implementation and customer side. And I still think that there's really a need for this guidance on the customer side.
Yeah. Well, does that mean that cost will increase, because now instead of customers just relying on the partner for the implementation, they also need to hire maybe a boutique firm to help with the implementation?
Theoretically, yes. So if you would, I think theoretically, yes. And I think that good that you asked the question, because I think that's the question asked, I think, the most. If you try to explain like, hey, what you do and what the reason is for it. So in theory, you would say, hey, but we already are having an implementation partner. We already have the system, which should help us. So why would we need an additional, let's say, Workday consultancy firm or Workday consultant on our end? Because that's not the model.
Yeah.
And I think if you still believe that the implementation partner plus the system plus the customer, that's all you need, then indeed, then it sounds like additional cost, right? But I think the experience and shows me that, and that depending there are for 100% there companies or clients who can handle it themselves.
Yeah, of course.
But they can only handle themselves properly if they also have the knowledge on their side already internally, let's say. So it's not always needed to have an external being hired to help them. If they have the internal knowledge, that's completely fine as well. But I think you can't run a project successfully if you don't have the system knowledge on your side. And you don't need to be all fully experienced. You don't need to have like a major team. It's just those few people who have the experience of implementing, who having the experience of design workshops, making decisions, sometimes just translating actually that business requirement to system. Sometimes it's like, because also the consulting firms, you don't always spend those many hours with the customer constantly. But if you're on the customer side, you're sitting more often with the customer and hearing constantly also discussions happening offline.
Yeah.
You know, like at the coffee machine, whatever. So sometimes you hear things which the customer maybe forgets to mention during the workshops, or translates it in a way that the consultant doesn't fully get it. And if you're spending more time with the customer who's implementing Workday, and you're hearing the requirements sent to the implementation partner, you often can step in also in time to like, wait, this is not what you understood is different, and you can then like step in time. You can also sometimes challenge an implementation partner if needed. You can also sometimes challenge the customer to say like, I don't think this is the right call to make. I think we will have more challenges in the future if you go for this certain decision. So you can also help with that decision maker. And I think it's crucial how you play the role, in the sense you can be trying to be the smart person in the room and show like sit on the customer side, and during a workshop being this smart person challenging the implementation part, like, no, you're not saying it right. No, you don't. This is wrong what you're saying. Or I think in that way you're just trying to show how much you know about a system. Yeah. And you're not serving anybody there. You're not serving the customer. You're not serving the implementation part. You're not helping anybody. You just want to show how good you are. Yeah. And nobody knows show off, and nobody knows everything about the system. So to me, it's really crucial that you are really that bridge between the implementation partner and the customer. Of course, serving the customer. So you're being hired, let's say, so you're really operating on the customer side, but you really should be being that bridge in between the two worlds, because it can happen. Both scenarios can happen. Once that a client should be challenged, or maybe helped to make the right decision, or maybe pushed to make quicker decision, or to fill in workbooks, for instance. That's the most typical example always. Yeah. But like, hey, we need to make decisions here, or no, we need to revise our decision, or no, we need additional support, whatever. And at the same time, also sometimes it's an implementation partner who could be, and not necessarily challenged, can also be like, hey, I've heard something in the background, and I think we should revisit our initial design. I know we're past a certain stage, because that's the most common thing that can happen. Yeah. Like, you pass design phase, you pass signed off, and then you suddenly come with these changes. And I think if you then being understandable towards the implementation partner as well, and being fair to them as well, to say like, hey, consultant, I really know that we passed all the phase of sign-offs, and I know we've passed certain stages, but can we please make this change still? I think it's really key to have like this, be on the same line in terms of communication. Yeah. Don't be the typical like, hey, no, I know we're the customer, so you need to listen to us. You're just going to change this, and if we need to raise a CR or whatever, then we're going to escalate it. So I think if you play your role nice, and you're really being that bridge between the two parties, the two worlds, then because at the end, your only goal is to have a successful implementation, and to ensure that the customer uses the system till the fullest. Yeah, and customers, they either pay the price during the implementation or after.
if the implementation is not going well.
Exactly.
So that's why I think having that early investment in getting someone or a company like AIMUP during the implementation is just going to save them in the long run. I have a quick question regarding the challenges in the implementation. Have you ever done implementation outside of the Netherlands, like another country?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Is there any challenges in the language, like translating, etc.?
Yeah, so
because all of your implementations are in Dutch, no?
No. So that's a fun thing. So I'm Dutch. I speak Dutch. I could never give and it sounds weird, but I could never give a workshop in Dutch.
No way. Okay. I thought it was in Dutch. Okay.
No, I also could never work in Workday being in Dutch, the language.
Okay.
If even like sometimes Dutch customers send me a print screen, like, hey, we have an issue with Workday. There is something, they send me a print screen in Dutch. I really think like, okay, where are they in the menu?
Yeah.
Which menu is
Where
this? Which related actions is this? I need to look it's completely different. And I'm so used to do it in English because it's global companies and we always have people from abroad. So we always had actually people, non-native Dutch speakers on projects, let's say. So it's easier to just do everything in English. Also email communication, even though you're in a room with sometimes just native Dutch speakers, email goes in English because you always have to forward an email. So that's why we're used to actually do it always in English.
Even in the workshop is in English.
The
tenant is in English. Then like when you go out for coffee or like in the break, like do you speak English?
No, then if it's like native Dutch speakers, they speak Dutch, of course. No. But it's just that the workshop is easier to give in English. Because certain words, I'm always like, how do I say this in Dutch? Like, because it's like some business words you simply don't use in real daily life. Yeah, business process, It's like sometimes also in Workday, some weird translation, like, hey, this is not Dutch like how you speak it like in the normal world, let's say. So no, I always speak English, but in the Netherlands we barely struggle with speaking English. But there are some countries in Europe where, which is also understandable, where in some countries where the people from the business sometimes are not very confident in speaking English, and sometimes difficult in understanding. So a lot of times that we then give workshops and then I have to wait that somebody was translating or that a discussion was happening that the customer is discussing between themselves. Do you have
any recommendations on how to deal with that? I had this challenge with countries like Poland or Germany, like where the language is a bit more complicated. Mm-hmm. Do you have any recommendations with it?
No, I think now maybe with AI you could maybe have like a live translation or whatever. No, but I think it always helps if somebody is there. So I think you just need to be patient. So because I remember that sometimes really like you have a planning like, hey, we're going to do 3 days of recruitment and then the 4th day is going to be some additional things like the parking lot items, whatever. I knew that if every topic we discuss, we end up with having a lot of translations in between. You just need to be patient because you want the customer to make the right call. You don't want to tell the customer like you need to rush now. So I was always trying to be as patient as possible, just to accept it and try to help there as much as possible, because you simply can't force somebody to suddenly speak. It can be challenging sometimes, and ideally you just need to be sure that, and that's the good thing about and we just discussed a bit offline, of course, or a topic of being on site with workshops.
Yes.
I think in every project, if you want to have a successful project, besides having some extra Workday knowledge on the customer side, I think being present as consultants on the customer side, like on site during key moment in the project, is critical to to a successful implementation.
Yeah.
I think we've shown that we can have very good workshops also during COVID, like fully remote, but I still think you really miss a very important element, and that's you can see people right in the eyes and you can understand you see somebody not understanding it. Mm-hmm. So you see sometimes when I explain something about how a process works or what a condition rules work, whatever, that sometimes they look like, hey, I don't understand, but I don't want to bother people to say like, hey, I don't understand.
So because you can tackle it right away.
Exactly. So you can tackle it right away, or just during a break, you can just explain it quickly. When you're online, you don't always see that. You can't see every person in their eyes. You don't have the time always. People sometimes have their camera off, distracted also by other things. So I think I think one of the most crucial things is being on site as well. So you can give the additional knowledge to a customer to be sure that they fully understood what you explained. Because the more they understand with the design session, the better the implementation goes. Otherwise, you always have the customer confirmation session or the playback session, as you call them, being a design 2.0 actually.
Yeah.
And I think you can tackle those things if you take your time to explain the baseline. And then, okay, I don't mind if we need to spend one extra day for an additional workshop, but I'd rather take the time to ensure that the customer understands what I've told. And if they don't understand English fully, fine, then we ask somebody to translate it. But I think so my tip to answer your question, long story short, is be patient.
Yeah, definitely. I like that. So you've explained what AIM-UP is all about, especially being the number one support for customers during and after implementation. What is next then for AIM-UP? What are your plans?
My plans, good question. It's I have a lot of plans, to be honest. I think what the next big thing is, for sure, is Workday. I'm not sure. Next big thing sounds like, but it's Workday Extend and build on Workday.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I think that's something which a lot of customers are looking into to ensure that you. I'm not necessarily. To me, Workday Extend or build on Workday is not a solution in itself. It's not like, hey, we need to do something with Workday Extend or with build on Workday. If you like the system the way it is and it serves the purpose you're having as a company, don't start in just for the sake of having Extend or being innovative to start spending money on it. But I think if you see that you've searched the boundaries of Workday and the capabilities of Workday, and there is this gap which can't be closed functionally, or there's no solution on the short run, then I think we're looking into Extend and building capabilities there. That's really something I think the next big thing, for AIM-UP to focus on.
Nice.
As I said, we're already covering and we're doing, of course, the customer side. So that's maybe also a bit of additional what we do. So besides the guidance during a big implementation on the customer side, we also do phase X implementations.
Okay.
So whenever a customer's like, hey, we want this additional module, we can support in that as well. We've done multiple phase X implementations as well. And I think there is often, and of course, maybe I'm a little bit biased, of course, but I think when you have like a one module or two module rollout, I think with a smaller boutique firm, you can go very quick, and you have very good consultants. Because since 2019, you see also in Europe, like the contracting world, there are a lot of very good experienced consultants out there. Where in the old days it was like, hey, the moment you went contracting, it was like, hey, you're not certified, and can you deliver the quality? I think we've passed that stage a long time ago, and that's why we also do phase X implementations. So
good.
Yeah,
I'm curious. One picky question, since you do recruiting, there's a little, not a trend, but I've been seeing a lot of customers going with like those external systems, recruiting systems, and just doing an integration instead of just using the recruiting modules. Have you experienced that? Do you have any like recommendations on that?
Yeah, and are you talking like the add-ons like Hired Score, like something like Workday Partners, or like completely different ATS
like
systems?
Greenhouse, for example.
Yeah. So I might be a little bit biased about Workday Recruiting. It was the first module I implemented, and I absolutely love it still. I love the topic itself, because I think implementing recruiting is, you really talk about the whole process. You talk about, that's the only module actually which goes outside of the customer's world, right? It's normally very safe inside. If something's wrong with the translation, okay, fine, somebody internally saw wrong translation. Recruiting, you go to the outside world. It's your first contact a candidate has with your company. So I understand also the sensitivity around the quality of the module, and I really understand certain recruiting specialists who really don't like or do not always like the Workday recruiting module, because simply there are certain things which other system, I'm not even going to mention them, because there are certain systems like specialized in recruiting which might be better
for very specific needs,
maybe. But I absolutely believe that if you use the Workday recruiting module till its fullest and the right way, that eventually it does serves its purpose. And I think it's a very good module, because especially on data, staying inside one system, you have a few good add-ons at the moment which could help you. Of course, certain things could be made a little bit easier, maybe like interview planning, but again, which ATS system has the best interview planning. You even need additional add-ons for interview planning itself. It's a topic, it's almost a module on itself, actually, interview planning, for instance. So I think in general, the Workday recruiting module is really good. But I think it eventually, and that's maybe without criticizing anybody from a recruiting team, so please don't shoot the messenger, but I really think that it's also about, there's never a system perfect for it.
Yeah.
And certain things simply need to be done. It's like maybe doing your administration. Nobody likes to do his financial administration, for instance. Whatever system you're going to pick, it's not always perfect. And sometimes you just need to do certain things, which, you might not find very flashy, but it simply need to be done. And I do relate to the point that sometimes it's a lot of clicks, like clicking here, clicking there before you get somewhere. But often it is related to getting to know the system, because I sometimes click because I did it so often in recruiting. I click so quick that I don't even know where I did click, and I think it's sometimes clicking 3 times, knowing where to click, is quicker than have to click 1 time but not knowing where to click. So I think it's all getting, maybe a weird cliche or weird example, but it is eventually most important that you get to know the system a little bit.
Yeah.
And at the start, it's always a struggle for everybody. It's like having a new phone. If I suddenly take from an iPhone to a Samsung, even though there might be the best phone there is, if I don't know where I need to click, I would say what a rubbish phone it is.
Yeah.
But so it's simply getting used to the fact, like, how to use the system.
I think the answer that you've just given, it tells a lot about your experience, your opinions, etc. And I think that's the main driver on why I'm a huge fan of boutique firms in general, because they can give that very specific and customizable service to these customers, so that you don't give that, normal or general answer. You really have data or experiences, or you heard friends or some other people talk about it. So I think that's a good value add. So thank you for showing.
Thank you,
everyone. That so.
Thank you for having me.
No, of course.
Time flew.
Tell me, Abdel, if someone wants to contact you, get to know you a little bit better, know a little bit more about AIMUP, where can we find you?
www.aimup.nl.
Yeah.
And first on
NL.
LinkedIn.
Nice.
Not .nl. Yeah. And .com was already taken. So we operate internationally, but no, it's .nl. On LinkedIn. Contact me on LinkedIn, reach out to me.
I'll put your profile link on the show notes as well.
Feel free to reach out. If you have anybody that's for customers, for Workday consultants, if you want to know anything about the contracting world, it may sound scary sometimes, but really just feel free to reach out. Happy to tell you more about it and to guide you in there. But because I think, there's a need for really good Workday consultants still. And happy to help everybody who's into it.
Of course. Thank you very much, Abdel. Thank you for sharing your story and your knowledge. And hopefully we can meet some other time for another episode.
That would be great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.